and a very warm welcome for joining us on a lazy Saturday morning for our session. Today, as a part of an LA Knowledge series, we'll be discussing the D2C space in India and its future. But before we begin, we have a small introduction for you about Lead Angels. So I'll just quickly share my screen. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Great. So again, welcome to Lead Angels. Lead Angels was started 7 years ago by a team of 3 from IIT Bombay. Since then, we have become a full stack financial services company for startups. Coming to our multi-layer screening investment process. So this is how we screen the startups that come to us. Our portfolio highlights, our startups have a high survival rate of over 80%. That exceeds the industry average. And we're the only angel network that has advisory, development, and professional services arms. Our full stack advantage is basically that we have an angels network. We have an arm that is offering financial advisory services to startups. And we have a professional services team as well that is helping startups with legal, accounting, documentation services. And of course, we have our own SEBI-registered angel fund through which we focus on pre-series A and seed stage funding. So that was a quick introduction. Now coming to the primary agenda of today's call, which is the D2C space in India, which according to various reports would be a $100 billion opportunity by 2025, fueled by over 700 million internet users. Online shopping in India is at an all-time high, and it has been showing a 24% year-on-year growth. E-commerce platforms combined with better logistics operations and increased internet users are enabling Indian startups to reach out to their consumers easily. Factors such as rising income, increase in first-time internet users, changing buyer persona have also changed the game in favor of new age digital-first brands. Now we would like to introduce our speakers for today's session. The event will be moderated by Mr. Sushanto Mitra, who is the founder and CEO of Lead Angels. Mr. Mitra has also co-authored the best-selling book, Funding Your Startups and Other Nightmares, with our director, Professor Dhruvnath. He was also the founding CEO of FYNE, which is IIT Bombay's startup incubator, and has been in the investing space for tech and startups for 20 plus years in various roles. Before we begin, a quick reminder for all attendees to fill in the feedback form that we'll be putting in the chat session in a while. This will help us design our future interactions better. Also, please feel free to put in your questions in the chat box, which we'll take towards the end of the session. So, over to you, Sushanto. Also request everybody to keep the mics on mute so that there's no disturbance in the background. Thank you. Over to you, Sushanto. You're on mute.
You're always muted when you want to speak and the other way around. So thanks a lot, Gitansh, for a nice introduction, which is good. And thanks, Aanan, Madhav, and all members of Lead Angels and other guests who questions. We will note them down and have them, shared with you. So we have a young and dynamic panel here. My role is just primarily to poke them with a few questions and then let the audience ask. My first panelist is Madhav, and Madhav is the founder of ZFW. It's a new concept. It's one of the first dark stores in India, and while he began in the dark kitchen business over a period, he has built this new model, which effectively provides the infrastructure for all all the D2C brands that are coming up. Incidentally, Madhav, you'll be interested to know, we also run or manage a micro VC fund for vegan ventures, and many of our potential investee companies are looking for that supply chain and logistics, etc. So I will speak to you about that. Thanks once again for coming.
Thank you,
Uh,
Sushanta. Thanks
yeah.
for having me.
Yeah. And glad we invested in you, Madhav. And all the best to you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, Anand. Thanks for coming. Anand and I have been, Anand is trying to help me to be in good shape. So the only thing I've been able to do is to wear the same color shirt that he's wearing. But apart from that, I have not been able to follow his example. But he has been a trailblazer in creating healthy brands for the millennials of India. And some of his brands have really hit the top of the line in terms of their growth. We are lucky to have Aanan and his company as our portfolio company, and he's got funding and doing very well now. Thanks, Aanan.
Thanks, Sushanta. Thanks for the introduction.
So, as you can very well make out, I don't come from the generation of millennials, right? I'm a couple of decades behind that. So we don't really understand. So in our times, it was, Unilever and Pepsi and a few other brands which used to hog all the limelight. And there's no other option. If you had to buy chips, there was only one brand of chips available in India. But, and to that extent, I may not be so smart. But, Madhav, if I can ask you that, why do you think that the D2C business has grown so rapidly? And why is it that now, as we speak today, and yesterday I was reading a newspaper article that the Aditya Birla Group is setting up a very large fund to invest or acquire D2C brands. Tata's have also done that. Whatever Jio has done, we all know. And there'll probably be a few more people who will be moving into the D2C branding. So why is it grown so much, and why is there so much interest amongst very large business houses in this sector?
I think a couple of factors, Sushanto, have sort of contributed to the entire adoption of D2C as a whole. First of all, the entire geo revolution, internet adoption across tier 2, tier 3, that's sort of increased the consumer education. Consumers now know what they're buying, and there's a higher degree of education in consumers, and of course more options available. I think COVID was another determinant of this, of the entire D2C adoption. What we were supposed to witness in 2025, that's come down to about 2021, 2022. We've seen a lot of evolution in the D2C space and how D2C is fulfilled in the last 18 to 24 months. Having said that, brands have wanted to be closer to their consumers and have a direct channel with their customers. E-commerce in terms of Amazon and Flipkart are good at what they do in terms of discoverability, good at what they do in terms of visibility and order volumes. But that comes at a high cost of commissions and a high cost of not owning your customer and the customer data. So I think 2 years ago, brands started feeling that they need to start having a direct channel with customers, knowing exactly what the customers need and having a direct channel for feedback. So all of these factors put together, the entire geo revolution, along with COVID, and of course the e-commerce risks associated with business, have all sort of coupled up and increased the entire D2C adoption in the last 2 years.
This sudden interest of large business groups like Birla's and Tata and Jio in this space, because they were not supposedly the great marketeers of India, and Unilever's and Procter and Gamble's were sort of more famous, and Nestle's of the world. So why are they interested, and what does it mean for somebody like you?
I think it's more of a network effect, right? When you see a few successes in the D2C space and you see brands becoming large, fighting the incumbents, and when the incumbents start seeing the risks of new age D2C brands sort of taking the market share, and they witness degrowth in their top lines, that's when all of these traditional larger incumbent business houses have also started, you know, focusing on the D2C space, adding the D2C channel to a lot of their product lines. And we've seen that across a lot of these groups. And why do we want to go so far? I think Anand can also double click on this because he has a deeper association with the Jubilant Group.
Sure.
So that's also a traditional business house. Anand, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I wanted to ask you two things. One is, how did you think of Wellversed, and how did it all begin? What's the backstory for your success? And of course, uh, what do you see the sudden interest of large business houses, including Jubilant, in this space?
So, let's analyze this from a first principles perspective. So what happens in the market is that there are small niches where, requirements emanate from. There will be small groups who have a requirement for a certain thing. And there has never been a shortage of people who are willing to fulfill that requirements, right? But typically, what stops from creators to reach these niches is the cost of the channel that connects these two entities, right? So the fundamental mechanics of the rise of D2C is the lowering of this cost of the channel, right? So you can easily reach the end consumer, which might be a small niche. So there might be a lot of chatter, there might be a lot of talk about a lot of D2C brands coming up. Very few of these will be able to scale beyond certain points, because this is the law of nature that very few things will be required by very large number of people, right? So it's not to say that these are not great brands. These are brands that will serve smaller niches, and they need to be willing to accept this reality, right? So now what fundamentally is happening in the D2C space is what happened in the music industry, where you have a lot of singers out there. They didn't have lower cost channels to reach the audience, but then suddenly with the rise of YouTube and all these digital channels, you can access consumer audience who want to listen to those kind of songs. And now the big players, the incumbents, what they fear is that as and when a niche is created, right, there are already so many creators who will identify it early on, and who will occupy it and be the first mover in that niche. So now this high degree of interest is driven by fear of not innovating fast enough. So this is what my fundamental analysis is. You're on mute. Sorry.
How did you start Wellversed, and why do you think it's done so well?
So I think it started as a personal quest, and I'm a person who's obsessed with the thought of death, and we eventually merging into blackness. And what I realize is that the human body is designed to live up to 120 years of age, but the ecosystem doesn't enable us to do that. And we have to think in terms of food and healthy food, and I think this is a distinction that shouldn't exist, right? Every activity that we indulge in, everything that we do should be healthy, or should enable fitness by default, which is the default state of human being. And that is how you end up living to 120 years of age. So it started like that, and as we got exposed to market realities, we feel that wellness is very it closely mimics what religions do, right? Everyone has their own understanding of what a religion is, or what their way to achieve God is, right? So there are a lot of different segmentations where people will say that this is the ideology that I believe in, and wellness closely mimics religion in that sense. So what we realized was that a single brand will never be able to cater to the entire audience, and eventually you have to create a lot of brands that are centered on these wellness ideologies. So if someone feels that plant-based is great for them, someone else will feel that plant-based doesn't provide enough protein and stuff like that. So these are hardcore ingrained ideologies that are very hard to get out of people, and eventually the way to win is to create a structure where you can create successful brands, right? So we think of ourselves as let's say a music creator that has understood how to create songs. So if every brand is a song that is a hit, so we need to understand the fundamental mechanics of creating great brands. And if you see any even incumbent players, typically what happens is that a brand reaches up to 1200 CR per year kind of a revenue, and they sort of saturate at that point, right? And in order to build a $1 billion company, you need to understand systematic creation of, you know, creating 1200 CR per year kind of brands. And so this is the broad thought process. And, you know, we don't get panicky, or we don't try to, you know, break the unit economics if something is not working, right? We understand that some brands will reach a certain point and saturate. They are still great brands, but you have to take it with a pinch of salt and be patient with it.
Got it. Right. Madhav, over to you. I wanted to check. You see this. During the lockdown, e-commerce really took a huge leap forward, and so on. Of course, now with the lockdown getting over, people are stirring out of their homes and going to malls, perhaps not with the same frequency as they did in the past, but they are going. And how do you see that affecting the growth of the D2C brands? Because in a way, that whether it's going to be omni-channel or it's focused on e-commerce, how do you see that evolving? But before that, I'd also like to know, how did you start ZFW, and what's been your journey so far?
I'll take the second one first.
Okay.
We sort of started ZFW almost a year and a half back, and we witnessed the gap between the post-order experience of D2C brands not being fulfilled. The average delivery times of any D2C brand, even the top ones, were 3 to 7 days in metro cities. In the last 6 months, that reduced to about 3 to 5 days. And what we're trying to do is sort of reducing that to the same day or the next day in at least the metros and the mini metros. With the increase in the entire quick commerce trends over the last 6 months, it's become even more important for all of the D2C brands to sort of deliver in the same day or the next day and be closer to customers. That's been the journey, and we evolved from the cloud kitchen space. We were running cloud kitchens for the longest time, and that's when we started ZFW Dark Stores in Jan 2021. Talking about your first question on what are the post-COVID effects of once the entire world is open, how do we see numbers? Are they going up or are they going down? I think retail is not getting diverted to D2C. A lot of e-commerce is getting diverted to D2C, and therefore people moving out in the post-COVID world doesn't sort of affect D2C numbers. D2C adoption is only growing by the day. We can see a rise in D2C numbers in a lot of our portfolio brands who we're servicing and enabling, just because of the fact that there's a higher degree of personalization in the post-order experience, and a lot of tech innovation in terms of reducing RTOs, taking care of abandoned carts, delivering faster, fulfilling within dark stores closer to customers, and delivering fast as a whole. Consumers have sort of shifted to the D2C side of things, and a lot of D2C focused brands are reducing their dependence on the e-commerce platforms.
What about the physical malls? Do you see that as becoming another channel for D2C brands?
I think in a geography like India, it's very important for a brand to adopt an omni-channel approach. We deal with a lot of D2C brands every day, and my fight with them is for one thing that D2C is just a channel. It's not a way of running a business. It's just one of the many channels that any consumer brand has to adopt in its consumer story. Sort of e-commerce is one channel, D2C is another channel, modern trade or say retail stores are another channel, and in certain cases, say in the F&B side of things, Horeca is another channel, right? So D2C is just one channel where you're directly dealing with customers, personalizing experiences, providing better, delightful experiences. But having said that, as a brand scales in the entire consumer story, going offline, going into modern trade, setting up their own stores for offline visibility is very important.
Yeah. So Anand, I'll put that across to you. Do you agree with what Madhav is saying, and what is your strategy as a brand to go forward in this? I
So,
would say
so
omnichannel.
I, so I would, go so far as to say that, 90% of the brands which we call as D2C brands should just be called consumer brands, right? Like Madhav rightly mentioned that D2C is just one of the channels, and it has its specific perks, and it is there for specific purposes, right? To understand your consumer, or maybe deliver very specific kind of experiences, right? If you talk about D2C brands in a very pure sense, that you are just building a business on a single channel, then those would be businesses that are like, swimming pool installations, or very hyper customized things which require a very very customized experience. So for 95% of the brands, we shouldn't even call them D2C brands per se. It's a misleading term. We should call them consumer brands. And you have fundamentally, and again, coming back to the first principles, you have to identify where the consumer need is, and you have to fulfill it, right? And in the process, you have to do it in a cost effective manner. So D2C, why we see the rise of D2C is because as a first step, the cost of that channel is lower than other channels. But all that is also changing with hyper evolving ecosystem. Now you have q-commerce. So if you want to tap millennial audience, let's say, typically we like to launch our products on Instamart or Blinkit first, if that's possible, right? Rather than doing performance marketing or getting external traffic on our website for specific products and things like that. So I think it's very context specific, and I don't believe that there will be any brand that can scale to 1200 cr per year kind of a revenue, and do that just by their own channel.
Madhav, the other thing is that, do you think that the skills that Indian entrepreneurs are building in the D2C side, or the stuff that you are, the skill sets that your company is building, there's an opportunity for these companies to go abroad, like into countries where may not be as well developed in terms of the internet infrastructure or the logistics, say in Southeast Asia or in Middle East. Do you think there's an opportunity like that? When we've seen a lot of Indian companies go abroad, starting with Ola and Oyo and so on. So do you see also an opportunity here, building brands as well as infrastructure to support uh, this new business?
Yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity for Indian brands to go international, and we've seen a few successes on this side as well. One brand that you all would have heard of is Vadam Teas. Vadam Teas, 90% of its revenue comes from international sales, global markets. They're less popular in India than they are in other markets, right? Um, I feel the major skill set for any of these founders building consumer brands is that they need to focus on the product and focus on the customer experience, and not focus on the post order experience. What we most often than not witness is that a lot of these brands, when they're starting out, they start building the entire supply chain in house. They want to build the warehouse in house. They want to build the last mile in house. They want to do the middle mile themselves, and they want to build the e-commerce website themselves. They sort of want to do the entire value chain in house. But my only advice is that all of these founders should just focus on the product, and focus on the post order experience and getting closer to customers, taking feedback, circling that back, and keep evolving as a product, as a consumer brand, right? And there are many companies in the entire ecosystem. Some of them are taking care of warehousing, some of them are taking care of logistics, some of them are taking care of post order experience, the tech stacks involved there. And yeah, the focus should be on building the brand. And as far as going international is concerned, I think there's a huge opportunity.
Thanks, Madhav. In fact, one of our portfolio companies, Godesi, started at a very very small scale, but today it's selling both in India and overseas. We have another portfolio company which is also in the tea space, which is also doing well. So Anand, my question to you is that we are at the end of the day angel investors, right? We want to invest in, and I think we think that D2C is a great opportunity. So now coming, trying to get the secrets from the entrepreneur. Uh, is it the so if we were to look at a D2C brand that we are very evaluating, how important is, you know, the the initial product taste and you know the looks and everything, as opposed to the skills of the entrepreneur who who's going to build the company. What I'm trying to say is that, is it that you get it the right the first time and you build a very successful company, or is it that it is more out of the hard work and the persistence and the scientific approach of the founder that leads to a successful brand and you know thereafter a successful company?
So I think uh, the ambit of the question is very broad, but I'll try to answer it as best as I can, right? So obviously the mindset of the founder matters a lot, right? And at the end of the day, if you are evaluating a founder, you need to see whether the first principle thinking exists or not. And that is the only way to create a great company, because no one exactly knows how things are going to unfold, not even the founder, right? So we can have reasonable estimates, but if the thinking is from a first principle perspective, and it's not ego driven, right? Most of the founders I meet in the D2C space, they have just thought that this is what we want to build, and there's minimal uh, gathering of feedback from consumers. And it's very easy to say that we should gather feedback, we should be customer centric, but it's very hard to put it in practice. It's like saying we should go to the gym every day. It's very easy to say, but it's very hard to implement, right? So these are the kind of disciplines that need to be looked at, that how concerned is the founder about all these fundamental mechanics, right? So coming to the tactical part of things, every brand is built on two parameters. One is the CAC, the first CAC of the first consumer, right? So how much does it cost you to acquire a consumer the first time lets you know whether the need exists in the market, whether you're solving a real problem or not, right? And then the repeat rates tell you whether your product is good or not. So even if 10 people have bought your product, have they bought the product again or not, right? So if the founder is not hyper obsessed about these two metrics, then it may take a while to build the brand. I'm not saying that the founder won't be able to get there. It's a learning curve to inculcate that kind of a discipline. But I think these are the two things that need to be looked at. And the third thing is an understanding that a brand building happens in phase-wise manners, right? So we there's a lot of talk about emotion building, story building, and all that stuff, right? But brand is a vehicle to carry the message in the larger audience, right? So typically what we are right now at the Wellversed accelerator, we are accelerating around 40 brands right now, right? So what we have seen is that from 0 lakhs per month to 80 lakhs per month of sales, a brand can only scale by solving the product market fit, right? So if you have identified the right need and you have created a product that has repeat sales, you can go up to 80 lakhs per month of sales. Even if you have no brand story, your branding is crap, it doesn't matter, right? It's only at that particular point that you need to have these elements in place. I'm not saying that people shouldn't think of the kernel at the beginning, but don't be hyper obsessed about that. Yeah, I'm not building a story, I'm not building an emotion. It doesn't matter. You have to crack the first thing first. It's like the body first needs to have a skeleton. Only after that you can have the skin, and then the clothing and stuff like that. So it's a phase-wise manner, right? And so the story is the carrier of the message, which has to be built after you reach 1 year per month kind of sales. So I think these are some of the frameworks that you can use to analyze how the founder thinks.
Wonderful, thank you. We will open the house, for questions. Before that, I just wanted to ask Madhav, do you think that with these, Thrasio type companies that have come to India, is that is would it mean that the end of the small independent sort of brands, and all brands will get consolidated between either the business houses or this is an ongoing process of evolution, that we'll have one cycle of where a lot of aggregators will come, and then there'll be smaller players, and it'll keep on happening over a period of time?
No, I think this evolution is very important for the entire space, for one reason, that in the entire consumer story, if you look at a lot of the categories, uh, solely cannot make money. Like, I'm working with 25 ice cream brands, but I have a strong feeling that no ice cream brand can ever make a profit in the next 10 years. And the only way to sort of earn money in a business like this is to get consolidated, run a bunch of brands under one engine with shared resources. In simpler terms, economies of scale.
Got it.
So what a Thrasio style company or a lot of these larger business houses now acquiring brands do is that they have central teams running a bunch of brands under the same engine, and that's how you see a better bottom line. You see a brighter bottom line, right? And that's very important for a lot of these categories, which are small categories independently, but when they come together and work as an engine, that's how they can see some money being made.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Before I end, I just have one point to make. Many of you who have come here today have also come here to invest in startups. While D2C is a very exciting space, we at Lead Angels, of course, are sector agnostic. We have multiple companies. Right now, we are evaluating and investing into two companies, one in the EdTech ERP space and one in the IoT space. So if you want to connect to my colleagues here, Sakshi and Gitansh, please do connect with them. And thanks once again. We're not going away anywhere, Madhav and Aanan, but we'll go back to the audience for questions. I think some questions were already asked, and maybe Gitansh, if you can read them out, and the rest will open out for the audience to ask.
Sure. So once again, request everybody to send in their questions in the chat box. We'll take them up one by one. So we have a question from Surya Tej, Mr. Surya Tej. He's saying that a human body needs 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. I believe that is for protein. And low-fat foods like fruits and some veggies will give healthy lifestyle. So he wants to know how Wellversed is different and how they are providing more value than providing protein. I believe this is about the precision nutrition. That's.
I think like it didn't. I didn't properly introduce the company first, so I'll just walk you through what we exactly do. So so we are essentially a Thrasio style model for wellness brands, but the only difference is that we come very early into the picture. We identify wellness brands, when they are doing a revenue of, let's say, 2 lakhs per month kind of thing. Then we provide them all the shared resources like Madhav mentioned, and we quickly scale them with the eventual aim of acquiring some of these brands, right? So we are not essentially creating so we are creating products which are centered on different needs. So we are not necessarily competing against a particular protein powder or a particular ideology. What we believe is that in wellness, different groups have different ideologies on how to be healthier and how to achieve their maximum wellness potential. And the aim is to be able to create some of the best wellness brands that cater to these ideologies via this accelerator model. So this is what we do. So I think the question here directly compares us to someone manufacturing protein or whatever. So I don't think it's as relevant here.
Great, thank you. We have another question from Parth Sharma. How important a FMCG manufacturer become D2C brand? So I believe they're talking about how there's been a transition. A lot of legacy players are entering into this sector. So Madhav, do you want to take that up?
Yeah, I'll take that up. I think legacy players are entering the D2C space, looking at a few successes of D2C brands scaling well. And it's very important for them to stay ahead of the curve by following the D2C approach, at least with a few select categories, which are D2C compatible. But having said that, reiterating my initial point that D2C only remains a channel and not a way of business.
And essentially this problem is being solved by people who are building channels themselves, right? So let's say if we talk about ITC stores versus ITC, listing their products on Instamart, right? So they'll have much better uptakes on the Instamart or Blinkit store rather than on their website. So they may choose to invest in the website and keep running it as a marketplace just to get consumer insights and understand their consumers, and they are willing to bear that cost to understand the consumer, but not necessarily looking at it as a channel that will become very large.
Correct. And having said that, it's very important to have a sort of a digitally native approach in scaling brands.
Right. We were talking about the digital consumer, and millennials at the forefront of driving change right now in the economy. Customer expectations are shifting with preference most for more streamlined purchase and experiences, right? I would just like to ask a question. So, how would Anand, Madhav, how would you describe the millennial consumer if you had to? Since I believe they would be a large chunk of your uh, target customer base. So if you could describe them in 3 words, I think that'll be great. Then we'll take more questions. So
Anand,
whoever
should I go
start?
first?
Yeah, you can go first, please.
I feel the millennial consumer is sort of defined as a consumer of 2025 who exactly knows what are the options available in each category, who exactly knows uh, what he needs in the product, and who weighs his options wisely, and who first has a digital approach of researching about the category before making the purchase decision. Essentially, sort of, double clicking on the traits of this millennial consumer. I think this is what I feel.
Yeah, so if I have to, kind of put them into lesser number of words. So one would be high disposable income, right? Very, conducive to experiments, and very high degree of individuality. So these are the three driving factors, I think, for millennials, yeah, even Gen Zs.
Wow, perfect, great. Point for all founders and investors to note down. While when building their brands. So we have another question from Mr. Prashant Nayak. What should be the entrepreneurs thinking when they are building brands in a commoditized space? What are some of your thoughts on differentiation of a product or brand which is commoditized? So, Anand, you want to take that, and then we'll
Yeah.
take Madhav's opinion.
So typically, in a commodity business, if if you're not built, if you're not taking the commodity to a premium segment, if you have to compete against the same commodity, right? So pricing is not something that you can experiment with, right? So the innovation typically can come either in the process used to creating the product, and then having certain profitability margins, increasing the profitability margins, or having a unique holdover of a certain supply chain in a certain geography. So I think when we think about commodity products, typically people take the approach that they'll just create a premium branding, and they'll be able to command a 1.2x premium price and all that. But typically those kind of brands don't really work that well. You'll see most of these brands lying around at baristas at airports and all that. But commodity business typically don't work like that. So the core need the pricing, obviously taste, and whatever. So if it's not a food product, so taste doesn't matter. But typically we see that in commodity business you can't experiment with price, right? And process and the internal supply chain is something that you can work with, or holding gain of certain geographies.
Thank you, Anand. Madhav.
Yeah, I think adding to what Anand says, price war is not a strategy that you can play while fighting the incumbents and a commoditized market. Customers coming to you for price will also go to somebody else for price. There has to be a functional niche for consumers to shift to you, and for you to sort of create a mind space, park a certain mind space in the consumer's mind. Uh, Whether it's in the distribution side or in the F&B categories, it's on the taste side, or it has to be a functional niche in terms of differentiation.
Got it. Anand, you just mentioned inventory, and how inventory is also a key point for D2C brands. So we want to know, do all D2C brands face the problem of inventory management, and has Wellversed faced it too in the initial days? And if so, how did you tackle this challenge?
So, when someone starts a brand, at first they are concerned about getting orders, and typically the next phase is not being able to fulfill those orders, or not being able to fulfill those orders fast enough. And typically you don't have much capital at that stage as well, to hold a lot of inventory. So it's just a hand to mouth situation where you are manufacturing as fast as you can. You need to ship those orders. And so we have kind of come back to square one, to the days of offline retail, where you need to hold a large amount of inventory. And why you need to do that is because you need to optimize for delivery time, and you need to have your product warehoused across across the geography, right? So right now we have, I think, warehouses across 7 to 8 states, although they're third party integrated warehouses, right? So you have to hold a lot of inventory, you have to have a lot of data analytics around it, because you need to reduce the cost of inventory that you're holding. So I think brands typically don't think of this, because the first concern for them when they start out is getting orders, right? And they typically don't go much deeper into how will they manage the inventory, how will they optimize the inventory, how will they manage the damages, how will they manage returns and things like that. So typically this is a problem that we are solving for other founders. Once a brand is empaneled with Wellversed, we take over the inventory, and it goes through the central distribution system, it gets warehoused in an optimized manner and things like that.
Great. Madhav, since you're solving this problem, would you also like to add something to what Aanan has said?
I think 100%. We deal with founders who are always confused about the entire supply chain bit. The intelligence of what sells where, in what quantity, at what pin codes, and what are your hero SKUs, especially for the shelf sensitive categories, it's very important. And founders early on are always trying to blitz scale revenues, right? And in this race, they more often than not, forget to solve the supply chain piece. And I think that's where players like, as Aanan mentioned, warehouse and us in certain categories come and sort of solve the post-order experience, supply chain management bit for all of these brands.
Got it. This also brings us to the next question from Chinmay Das. A great session so far. Thank you. Question for Madhav: suggested ways for frozen food early stage brands to solve last mile fulfillment in tier 1 cities. This one is directed.
I can only answer this by saying we'll get in touch after the call.
Great.
But sort of answering this for everybody else as well. There are a bunch of companies solving last mile for the frozen categories, and we're one of them. We help a lot of, in fact, we work with 25 ice cream brands, and we solve last mile delivery for them in terms of fulfillment and delivery. Happy to share more on this post the call.
So we'll put in ZFW's website and contact details in the chat box. You can reach out to him. Another question: what are the important emotions of the customers which need to concentrate as a founder while creating a brand? So I think we've covered that in the millennial question, but if you would like to add anything more, then Madhav or Aanan, anything?
Aanan, you should take this up.
So I think it will really depend on the sector and the segment that you are in, but typically I think what is driving the D2C revolution, or if you can say of sorts, is high degree of disposable income, and that gives you the leverage to experiment a lot. And what's going on with the social media, where you have to be on your toes all the time, you have to be in a presentable form. I think that is a major driver of what's happening in the D2C space, right? So I think it's not just about what you feel, but what you collectively feel as a group. So there are startups capitalizing on that. There's a high degree of personalization being done by certain brands. So how they make you feel on a daily basis. So I think these are the drivers predominantly.
Got it. Then from Manjunatha, great session so far. How does low minimum order quantity challenge? It's a challenge for optimizing logistics costs for D2C brands, and how to address it. And do the low time to market for B2C brands affect brand stability over the long term?
So typically there are channels who will just charge a flat commission on your MRP. Even if it's a sub 100 rupee product, right? So I think if you need to start with such kind of a product, you need to work on the product channel fit first, right? So let's say Amazon retail might be a better channel than Amazon like the normal Sell Central, right? So I think these are the things that you need to look at. So I think there are solutions out there which cater to these problems.
Great. Madhav, you want to add something?
Yeah, I feel it's important to sort of use shared services on the logistics part in the initial days when the order volumes are low. But having said that, giving a flip side of the coin, I don't feel logistics cost is impacted in a big way when the order quantity is low, considering the fact that logistics cost is a cost attached to an order level and is not a cost attached to 100 orders, 1,000 orders, or 10,000 orders, right? What impacts the brand in a bigger way is a low basket size. Then the number of orders, it's the size of the basket that sort of impacts the brand, because your entire P&L is driven on the size of the basket. If your average order value is 300 as against your average order value being 1,000 rupees, that changes the game. Every cost for a consumer brand is a percentage of his average order value. Anand, you'd agree with that?
So I think obviously like these metrics are important. Like every founder would want to drive up their average order or average selling price of the order, right? And this is something that need to be worked at. But I think fundamentally coming back to the repeat rates, right? So if you are doing something in the blind pursuit of, let's say, increasing the order value, and then you are hampering your repeat, so that is something you don't want to do. So there has to be a balance between trying to make the consumer shed a higher amount in a single order versus how it's impacting the repeat rates.
Bang on. I think analysis of consumer cohorts is very important. Yeah. How your customers are reacting in the first 12 months and the first 24 months.
So typically, just to give you an example, so we also used to do this in our earlier days, where we used to bundle certain 200 rupee products into two, and we saw that there was a there was a perception that if they are shedding out 400 for an order, the perceived value of the product was lower for the consumer. Things like that.
True.
Gitansh, if I can take a question, please.
Please go ahead.
So, this whole concept about tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3 being very, very different markets and at different price points and different likes and dislikes. Is that a myth? Is it, you guys are, in this business, is it getting more and more homogeneous as we go forward, or it remains very, segmented? Aanan, what do you think?
So, in the last couple of years, we have seen higher uptakes from tier 2 cities. I won't say it's still equalized. And, it again boils down to perceived need versus disposable income, right? And that is always going to be a fundamental driver of how consumers feel what they should buy or what they should experiment with. So I won't say they still have equalized, and this is specific for our industry because wellness as a concept comes into the mind of the consumer after their basic needs have been sorted, right? So in very narrow segments like, let's say, protein powders, I would say it could have equalized probably, but wellness as a holistic concept, as a nuanced concept, there's still a disparity between tier 1 and tier 2.
Got it. Madhav, what about, how do you react?
My thoughts are very basic in the sense that the tier 2 and the tier 3 markets are small and upcoming markets. The opportunity in terms of the size of the market might be slightly smaller than the metros and the mini metros. They're trusted, vetted markets. When you enter, there's a sort of a blueprint and you scale across the first 7 cities. But opportunity is higher in terms of lesser competition and in the smaller markets, and more room to experiment.
Makes sense.
Having said that, I think even post-order experience-wise, supply chain availability in tier 2, tier 3, I think apart from courier, everything else in terms of hyperlocal is not prevalent as of today, or is not mature as of today, as compared to the first sweet 7, typical Delhi, Bombay, Pune, Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, and Calcutta, these 7 cities.
Right. I think there are a couple of more questions for you, Gitansh.
Yes, this brings to a very interesting question from KV Gopalakrishnan. How about the appetite of entrepreneurs to expand to advanced markets, making them an international brand rather than getting acquired by bigger traditional business houses? He's asked this because I think, I'm not sure though, that there is a problem in the advanced economy too. So what do you think?
So I think it's about creating network effects at as low cost as possible, right? So if you are thinning out over geographies or over several consumer segments, network effects are never going to get created. So let's say if a brand has reached a 40-50 lakhs per month kind of a sales, it's time for them to start working on networking effects where, a consumer should always hear that, this brand is best for these kind of products. And what we typically propagate is that you need to focus your attention SKU wise as well as consumer segment wise, because you need to create those resonance effects. Typically the mistake that early stage brands make is they want to position their brand as broadly as possible in terms of SKU offering. They'll have like 50 SKUs, two of which are selling, 48 of which are not selling. So that doesn't make sense. And then distributing those SKUs over several consumer segments, whether it's domestic, international, and trying to do everything all at once. So what you want to do is you want to create a proof of concept first in a particular consumer segment, that this SKU, this brand stands for this SKU, and within this consumer segment, if you ask anyone, they'll say this is the best product. And it is only after that you need to move to other markets and do the same thing, repeat the same thing, whether it's US or Middle East or whatever.
And I look at this question slightly different from a slightly different lens. Um, I think what Gopal Krishnan is also asking is, should a brand uh, go for the acquisition strategy by a Thrasio roll up, or should he be continuing to grow? I think that sort of depends on the growth curve. If the growth curve is steep and you're still seeing good month on month growth numbers, then one should continue to scale, raise more capital, and go to the next level. But when you start seeing the brand stagnate in terms of potential, in terms of a saturation in a particular market or segment, I think that's when brands start exploring acquisition and M&A synergies with a few of these roll-ups in India.
And I think it also depends on what the personal choice is. It's very
Correct.
personal dependent. Most of the Thrasio style deals we have seen are founders who have burnt out at a particular point, and it's
Distressed ones.
yeah. So it's very hard for them to manage P&L, keep on growing as well, or they have not been able to raise funds and stuff like that.
It's more like a choice between sell versus crash.
Correct.
So we have 5 minutes left, Gitanj. So
I'll just
have
please.
your poll, and if anybody would like to share their feedback before we go on to the next question about this session. A lot of questions, but a very quiet audience. Please do.
Feel free to unmute and ask questions as well.
We'd love to hear your voice and see you. Hi, Devinder. You don't have a question. You're the guru that we are waiting to hear from.
It is actually a very great session so far from Aanan and from Madhav. Yeah, and I actually started up a edtech firm here. So, but ours is like direct B2C.
Yeah, you can get connected to Gitanj and he will direct you.
Sure. And the questions what I asked so far, like just going out to the customers and emotions and everything, like it was clarified by Aanan, really nice manner. So it's really cool, and it really helps us as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Anybody would like to share their view, feedback on the session? We have a couple of minutes left. Fine. You had
Arnav, would you like to add something? In case you can hear us. Or I'll quickly take the questions, I believe. So we have, we are in 2 D2C agri-food products right now. We are selling through stores, but the growth is very low. So here's my question to you is, should we build our own marketplace or we choose other marketplaces like Amazon? Like in D2C space, if 20% customers are coming directly to you, it's a big number. So how do you, Madhav and Aanan, look at this and what would you recommend? And how do you bring more customers from the marketplace to your own, own website? How do you look at this?
So, to put this very simply and from a tactical perspective, I would say that you should sell from third-party marketplaces first. You should build your own marketplace. I would say own store, which is very easy to set up on Shopify. But let organic traffic drive that sales. Don't put too much effort into let's say doing performance marketing on Facebook, Instagram, which has anyways become very expensive, right? And you may choose to do certain Google AdWords or whatever, capture the search intent, because the first thing you want to do is you want to capture the search intent, because that's when you will understand whether the need really exists or not. One. And on the third party channel side, again, because both these channels are search oriented, where people are coming and searching directly for the product that they want to buy, and that will help you understand whether the need exists or not, right? So focus on the first you need to determine that whether the need exists for the product or not, or whether the space exists or not, or the space has been saturated by other brands, right? So things like that. And your own channel will only be there for you to understand the feedback on the product, the repeat rates, and all these granular metrics, right? So both will have to be done, but do it in a way where you're not squandering all your effort.
Great. There are a couple of, there are two interesting questions. We'll quickly take them before we, end the session. So Arnav Singh.
The reality is Madhav has a hard stop at 12:30 and there are 50.
Yes.
It's the same.
I'll let Aanan take the rest of the questions. I think I have a hard stop at 12:30. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for coming, and let's be in touch.
Yes, thank you so much. Thanks, Aanan. Thanks, Shanta.
Cool.
Thank you, Madhav. Yeah. So Arnav Singh says, great session. Question for both panelists. What is your proudest achievement so far with the ventures? Aanan, would you? Yeah.
So the proudest achievement is the team that we have created. We have a very, very unique culture at Wellversed, and it speaks for itself. So anyone can speak to any member of the team and they'll say it's one of the best company cultures that we built. So we are very, very hyper focused on building a team around two key qualities. One is trust, second is excellence. And typically companies try to build themselves by inculcating excellence first. But by the time they build excellence, the trust within the team members is lost. So we have done it the other way around, where a high degree of trust between team members. And what we sincerely believe in is that even if you as a team, you have lesser skills than someone else. If you have a high degree of trust, degree of psychological safety, you can do better things than teams who are better skilled. So this is what we sincerely believe in.
Gitansh, is there a poll that you need to take before we close feedback session?
We don't actually have a poll today, so we have that feedback form. I've put it on the chat. I'll put it again. Yeah. So for
love the feedback form. Please do share your feedback about the session, or if you wish to get in touch. I'm leaving my email ID here for any of you who want to get in touch, either to start something or to invest in something, right?
Great. Do you think we can take one last question?
One last question, one for luck.
Yeah. Last question, and we'll end the session. Question from Miss Anisha Khanruja. Is the online buying more women skewed? Does it make the D2C brands focus more on women? Very interesting.
So typically we have seen in certain segments, which have high degree of resonance, that female buyers have a tendency. So both from a sessions perspective and conversion perspective, the numbers have been higher for females. And because typically the rise of D2C has been led by certain needs which are female centric, right? So whether it's beauty, fashion, home appliances and stuff like that. So typically where females are making the decisions. And what we are now seeing is something known as the pink tax, where even seemingly products of the same value proposition will have a higher cost if the brand is centered on females. So this is happening in the market, and this is a direct result of the fact that females in fact are more active when it comes to D2C buying.
Great, that's a great insight. Thank you very much, Aanan. Thanks, Gitansh. Thanks, audience and members who are here. Hope to have some more sessions like this in the coming days. For those of you who are from Delhi, please tag next Saturday evening. Please block for an event, offline event that we'll be having.
Great, and please feel free to reach out to me or Sushant or anybody from the team to know more about it.
Thank you. Great. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Aanan. Thank you so much for your time today. It was a pleasure having you on the call today.
Anytime.
Hopefully we'll connect soon, offline.
Sure.
Great.
And thank you, Gitansh, for giving me this opportunity. It was really nice to be part of this, two great entrepreneurs in front of us. And thank you so much. I actually, I thought I would have missed this meeting yesterday, but I made out somehow and it's really a pleasure actually be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Sur.
Thank you for your kind words. Yes, Meet Kalra, we will be putting the recorded session on YouTube, which will be there by Monday morning. So we'll be also put it on our social media post. So, or you can just reach out to me on email and I'll be sending it over to you on email. So we'll be recording the session and putting it up. Great. You're welcome.
Thank you for the lovely.
Thanks, Devang, for joining us.